Hello and welcome to Move Conversations. This is your host Venkat. In this episode, we talk to VB Kasi. Kasi, as regular listeners will know, is a fellow IFTN and a veteran commodities trader who worked with COFCO America, COFCO Switzerland, Noble Resources in Switzerland, Coke Oils, which is now part of Wilmar Group, and so on. So last time Kasi was with us, he shared some of his interesting experiences in Turkey. Today we have him back to understand the crisis in the soya bean trade that happened nearly 20 years ago and what was his experience at that time. So, Kasi, welcome to Move Conversations Trade Staff. So, let's hear about your experiences in trading soya bean with China.
Thank you, Venkat. Good to be back. There are so many things that happened in a career that you can keep recounting stories after stories in this.
So let's start today's discussion with with a quick overview of the soya bean global supply chain and the overall soya value network. Just a short overview so that audiences will be able to know and relate to the global players, the national players, how they are connected to each other in the value network, so that when you go deeper, sharing your experiences later.
So we got to go back to a little bit of the growth of Asia in a way, and the rise of China in this story. So Asia has been developing, let's call it probably more from late 80s onwards and on a big run up. And it's been rising forever for the last
Right.
30, 40 years. And China played a very important role in that rise. And so China got into World Trade Organization. They were not members of WTO till 2001. So they finally got into WTO in 2001. And that actually started a massive bull run on a lot of commodities. And commodity space really got a boost from Chinese admission to the WTO.
Right.
So 2001, if we go back to a bit of the developmental models that we look at, that as the GDP rises, normally protein consumption goes up. And so that is a direct correlation in a way for a lot of countries, exceptions being India, simply because India is still predominantly a vegetarian oriented country. So in the case of China, their imports of soybeans at the time of WTO entry were somewhere in the region of sub 10 million tons. We were just about starting to get into the mode of importing more soybeans so that they raise, essentially soybeans is crushed, processed into soybean meal and soybean oil, majority.
Right.
And then some byproducts, lysine, things like this. So the meal is the one that goes into feeding the animals. So it's whether you call it, in the case of China, it's hogs or hogs and pigs, poultry, it can be dairy, it can be so many other animals, aquaculture, which is another major industry. So China got in at this stage. And by 2003 or 4, China was somewhere around 25 million tons of imports. And so you can imagine that from a 10 million to 25 million, that's already a massive 250% jump. And similarly, they kept jumping. And currently, as of this year, 2021, I think we are expecting Chinese imports to be somewhere like about 100 million tons. It's a spectacular run up in the imports, and tells you the story of the rise of China in a way in the commodity markets. And it's the single biggest agri-commodity supply chain in the world. Soybeans is still today the biggest, single biggest from North and South America to China. This is one of the biggest supplies. So that's the basic background to how the setting was in way back in 2003, when I was part of Noble in Singapore, and I was getting to grips with the Chinese imports of soybeans because they were rising, and we had to have a kind of plan as to how we're going to ride this wave. Beginnings.
Okay. And so it was an early stage for your company, Noble, right? Noble at that time.
It was an early stage for almost everybody. All the major grain houses, whether it was Cargill, Labungi, or ADM, or Dreyfus, These are the major players, and Wilmar, of course, which is another major player in China.
Right.
And COFCO on the other side was a major importer in China, which is because
Right.
they have massive position in the domestic market. So
Hmm.
these are the major players at that point in time. So they all were getting into this mold of bigger imports into China because their domestic production of soybeans sort of plateaued. They were probably stuck, not going too much, not too high, not too going down, but they were just about there. So that's the reason they needed more and more imports as the population started demanding a better, food and nutrition in a way, because of the rising consumption. And they
So you said that,
also getting.
yeah. But go ahead.
Go ahead. No, so the Chinese were getting more prosperous. So obviously they were demanding better, nutrition. So that's
Right.
what soybeans are going to help in a way indirectly.
Right. So you mentioned that, North and South America to China. So who are the main suppliers apart from USA at that time? And who are
So
new entrants and so on?
in North America, it's US is the major supplier in any case. In those days, US was a lot bigger supplier of agri commodities compared to South
Right.
America. South America was again a rising continent in a way in agri business. They were not as big as they are today. It's a lot of that growth in South America is on the back of Chinese consumption,
China.
really. It directly boosted the production of agri commodities like soybeans, corn, and various other things in Brazil and Argentina. So these are the two major. So let's put it in soybean market. If you want to be importing, you are really importing from one of these three countries. That's
Correct.
mainly the source. 95% of it comes from these three countries, and very little from other countries.
So these were the things that were happening at the time. And so what were the things that were developing at the, in terms of like leading up to the, situation that we're going to discuss further.
Right. So in 2003, of the kind of 20-25 million tons of imports that year, we were looking at COFCO, Wilmar having their own kind of supply arrangements because they are the largest in the country.
Right.
And then you had several other local players, mostly. And there were very few foreign companies. Wilmar was one of them. And then there was Cargill, I think, had one plant with a JV. Because China at that point, till 2001 or 2, was not even allowing foreign companies to set up 100% owned companies in a way. So it was not that it was easy to also go, and nobody was ready to go into Chinese market on their own completely, on their own stream. So they were looking for some kind of a joint venture partners. So Wilmar also had a JV with COFCO in one of the plants, and then they had other kind of arrangements. And so they were there already on the ground. So these are the big guys. Now, what is left beyond these two is where the addressable market for a commercial is, like a Noble or anybody else was looking to sell soybeans apart from those two, right? Because, and they were very, very, of course, cued and very clued into the whole supply chain, that they had their own ways of buying at that point in time. So the real addressable market probably was no more than 5 or 10 million tons out of the 25
million tons.
So this was the background. And in 2003, if you look at the charts and of the price action in 2003, there was a shortage. The supply and demand was very tight. The supply was very tight because of weather conditions. So we were coming into a kind of a market that was rallying from somewhere around 560, 570 per bushel on soybeans, which looks like a dream today. But then it rallied all the way to almost $10.50 or $10.60 a bushel by the time we hit March of 2004. So there was a continuous rally in the soybean market at the same time. Now what happened with the rally in the market? Normally buyers get very encouraged when the markets are rising. A lot of Chinese importers who, now obviously most importers don't have a lot of experience, a lot of track record. They were all there for last maybe 1, 2, 3 years. Some of them may
Right.
be a little longer, but they've not really been part of a whole international trade standard
Cycle.
operating procedures and cycles in a way. So buyers were basically these, and some of them were probably related in some way or another to the existing players, JVs, and things like this. So we started at that point around probably August, September of 2003. We had lots of inquiries coming from China. So we started selling to some of these guys very selectively. We did our own work as much as possible, but it was still not very easy to pick. The big guys had their extremely tight terms and conditions. There was nothing to make out of it. And the smaller guys were too dangerous to get into. So you had to really pick the best of the mid ground in a way.
Yeah.
So that's how we got into the market at that point in time. So we had a sales of about 5 cargoes as of November of 2003 or so. 5 or 6 cargoes actually. So we are already 360,000 tons, 350, 360,000 tons of sales in an addressable market probably of 5 to 10 million for the whole of next year.
Right.
So it was a great beginning for us, and we were pretty happy with the way we were conducting the business. By the time the year ran out in 2003 itself was the next year. And then we had opportunities obviously to sell again next year for some more. And so we were thinking we'll go up to 1 million, 1.5 million tons of total sales for the year, which is pretty decent by those standards at that time, because you got to make sure your risk management is very much in place, that you're not just selling to anybody and everybody. The other issue was that since most of the bigger players, apart from just one plant here, one plant there, and one cargo here, one cargo there type of buyers, bigger players were mostly in a kind of payment terms that they wanted it to be DA.
Right.
DA, 90 days, 120 days, because someone else is offering it, whatever that was. So we did not want, although there was a lot of debate within the company on the desk as to, okay, if we pick up the DA buyers, maybe we end up selling another 10 cargoes eventually.
Right.
But we went back and forth, and finally I took a stand that no, we are not selling to anybody who wants a DA payment unless it's the top tier, the first rung of these players, or 2-3 of them, that's it.
Right.
So we sold all the cargoes based on letter of credit payment. So everybody had to open letter of credit, and then the shipment will happen 1 month before shipment, with some deposit. That kind of terms and conditions is what we lined up. So that's how we ended the year 2003, maybe early 2004, with March shipment starting up in Brazil. That's when March normally is the time that Brazil starts shipping. And Argentina normally comes in late April, early May onwards because of a later harvest. We had one cargo also of Argentina that was coming up at a later stage.
Right. Right.
So this is how it was set up as we got into February,
Right.
2004, and we had a lot of pressure from the buyers, the early buyers, to get the beans in faster.
Okay.
Because they are looking at some pretty good profits. They were basically distributing probably, and they had their own tie-ups with some local processing companies. And everybody was clamoring for the beans to arrive like yesterday. So we made special arrangements. We pushed literally our suppliers to get the beans in early March, so that we shipped as early as we can in March itself, early March. So we had the first ship that sailed out probably more like 10th or 15th of March, because the harvests, all said and done, get delayed. There will be some delays, some problems, all that stuff. So we had the first ship out by about 15th of March, with an arrival into China, southern China, that was the discharge port, by about 20th of April. So this was the first shipment that went out, and we subsequently had another 4 shipments coming up over March and April, and March, April, even some May, and one Argentine coming up in early May. So this was the lineup for the 6 ships.
Okay.
So this happened. Everything was still looking good. March came and went. We are like 1060 hitting the highs on the markets. And our vessel reaches the first vessel and ours happened to be the first vessel arriving in China. All the efforts that we put in.
You
It
got
was
the
the
figure.
first one that landed in the discharge port in China, in Xiamen.
And this was which origin?
This was Brazilian origin, and the shipment
Okay.
was coming from Rio Grande.
Okay.
So we had the ship arriving, and I mean there was nothing too concerning about anything. So it was all business as usual. But then we got a message saying that phyto authorities in China found on inspection some pink beans in the.
Okay.
I mean, we
So
said,
what's a
okay,
pink bean?
now pink beans. So we didn't know what was pink beans at that stage. Anyway.
Okay.
Because we're
You
not
too.
used to pink beans in soybeans. So we we had to do some investigation, and then they sent us some pictures. All that happened, and then they stopped discharge actually for a while, and we are running helter skelter to find what happened exactly. This also probably came over a weekend, so we had to let the markets open and go back to check. What we realized was, because it was a very tight supply year on the previous year, beans literally were cleaned. The bins were cleaned by the suppliers in Rio Grande or in some other ports in Brazil. In cleaning up of the bins, somewhere the beans that are kept for resowing, which is basically seeds, they get coated with this whatever fungicide and insecticide, all those things. Those are normally coated and they look like pink color. And somewhere they're mixed up in the supply chain. Now, despite inspections, despite global international inspection companies, a whole lot of people watching, these are in minute quantities, but they got into the supply somewhere and nobody detected it at the origin.
In the sampling, etc. Yeah.
Sampling and all that. So they arrived at discharge port, and that's how, when they found these pink beans, they said, "What is this?" And they stopped. Now, till then, normal contract terms for beans or any agri commodities normally will say that as part of the specifications, apart from whatever major specifications, there will be a phrase that will be added saying free from pesticides, insecticides, or poisonous seeds, most importantly, weeds, things like this. And in the case of some of the commodities, they'll even say aflatoxin, free from aflatoxin. Now,
Free from aflatoxins.
Aflatoxin, not normally people don't go checking when they say free, they think it is free, but free means there is some allowance. And now the allowance has to be very small, really. That's why it's virtually free. It's not free, but it's virtually free. So aflatoxin, normally when they say free from aflatoxin, 20 ppb is already allowed by international standards, anywhere to anywhere. In this case too, if it is free from poisonous seeds, you could have some poisonous seeds. You could have a little bit of weeds that are not probably edible, or they could be poisonous too, but in such minute quantities. But
so minute will be like in parts per billion or parts per million?
Parts per billion, definitely.
Yeah.
Not even million. So, I mean, 20 parts per billion is actually quite a lot of quantity if you pick it up on a big ship. But that's how, so nobody bothered about this problem. And when it arrived and when they started the whole inspection rigmarole in China, that's when suddenly everybody had to sit up and say, okay, but yeah, you found the pink beans, but how many are there? Oh, but there are so many. Okay, fine, so many, but how many? So they picked up and picked up and picked up. Okay, it's still numbers. You can count the numbers in a way at that stage. So we say, if you can count, it means it's free, like international standards. Right? So what is the problem? So the phyto authorities in China then clarified, saying when we say it is free, it is free. Not a single seed, not a single weed has to be on board. So this, we said, okay, then obviously this is the local CIQ that is saying this. Why not we go to the Beijing CIQ? Then it went up, of course, very quickly to Beijing CIQ. We were waiting for clarification. Then Eventually, the clarification came, and Beijing CIQ took the same stand, saying, so that's when it hit us for the first time that the interpretation of these specifications is very different, which we knew in international trade, it can be different in different countries, but this was like from something to almost nothing.
Right.
This we first could not believe this can be, and we said no, it cannot be. Something will change anyway. Somewhere something will have to change. The inspection agencies as well as the associations, the export associations like ANEC. ANEC is an association in Brazil for soybeans, and Chiara or whatever. There are a couple of these associations in Argentina. We asked around, we got even USDA specifications, Department of Agriculture. And everybody, when we drilled deeper, there was some allowance shown. And they all clarified also, saying, yes, it's agri produce, you cannot have completely zero. So we gave all these papers back into the authorities, but they held firm and they said that now the question is, okay, fine, now you found this, what do we do? What's the next step? Now, as this drama was unfolding, because we were the first, obviously, the others were just still completely stunned and waiting to see what would happen. In the meantime, a whole host of ships hit Chinese ports continuously. They started coming. And everywhere there was a serious inspection. The inspection became a lot stricter. Till then, it was fairly relaxed and you were getting the beans and it was flowing in. Now it became very strict. Things slowed down at the ports and they started finding pink beans across other ships also. So then it became from a one company problem to industry problem.
True.
So we had a lot of calls around with all kinds of our competition to collaborators, suppliers and buyers, all kinds of things. And we realized basically that this is not going away so quickly as we expected. We thought maybe there will be a delay of 10 days, 15 days, and we'll sort it out and things start moving again. How can the country just stop imports anyway? So something will happen. Now, finally, this dragged for almost a month or so. And in May 15th to 20th, if I remember vaguely now, there was a circular from the government, from the authorities saying that all these companies who ship these pink beans and the suppliers in the chain, whoever is appearing on the bill of lading, because he may not be the actual seller to the buyer, it can be a trader in between. So they took out a list of companies, something that ran to the extent of 20, 30 companies maybe, and they blacklisted everybody. They sent a blacklist on all the suppliers saying they cannot supply any more beans to China. Now this
So
is
this is not about the trading companies in between, intermediaries. It is about the original suppliers back in Brazil and wherever else who had pink bean cargo.
They are Brazilian suppliers. Argentines are not there except if they happen to be common.
Right.
So we had suddenly a situation where most guys cannot actually supply anything to China. So that then became a massive issue.
Right.
And the ships are piling up still as it happened. So this then resulted in a situation where I had to go literally to the buyer after almost a month or so. I think in sometime in mid-June or so, I had to go to the first buyer because our ship was rejected. And so were so many other ships. But ours was one of the first, so we had the first rejection in a way. So,
and you must have been paying like demurrages or what, like $80,000 a day or what?
Yeah, that was the other major hassle, really seriously hurting the industry. Twofold. One was the freights were very high at that time because there was this massive buying from China suddenly happening. So Panamax freights went up to 60, 80,000, somewhere in that range on a daily rate basis. The second problem was that the prices that shot up from somewhere around 560, 580 to 1060 in March started cracking and they started sliding now. So now you had the double whammy of One, you are paying for the vessel sitting outside with no idea when they actually get discharged. And the second was the buyer who hedged maybe his purchases at some price, X price, which could be $9 or $10 or whatever. Now he's seeing that prices are going through his levels, and he's now also in the red on top of it. So he takes the cargo, he has to not only pay the market difference domestically because he's selling cheaper than, but he's also paying for the ships, the demurrage that is occurring on the ships. So this then was a perfect storm virtually in the industry. It very rarely it happens like this that the whole industry gets affected.
Everything gets added up.
And so that then meant that I had to sit down with this buyer and negotiate. That's when you realize things go wrong, they can go dramatically wrong, and you never look at a scenario like this. So it's a great learning for VUCA students, let's put it that way.
Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, right?
You don't look at the backside of the contract and fine print kind of a thing. Now, importing into a country is easy, but exporting the same out of the same country at the same time, re-export, is not an easy thing because nobody
Right.
attempts it normally. In normal course of business, you don't
True.
attempt
True.
this. So this is the situation we got into. Now to re-export, you need an express permission signing off by the importer.
Mm.
It effectively means you are negotiating with the importer himself to get your ship out to export.
Right.
So, okay, so I had to go and negotiate with our buyer, and luckily at that point in time, luckily, unluckily, whatever, I had this Argentine ship also coming, and the buyers for that did not open their LC in the meantime. They just said that, okay, you're all blacklisted, we cannot open LC. That was the simple argument. Now here is the guy who opened LC on us. We cashed their letter of credit and we have the money. So I went and sat with the guy for almost a day, and that's a subject by itself what negotiations took there. But we negotiated. I agreed on with him, and he agreed with me to take our vessel out. To take the vessel out is an achievement also, and then put against that the vessel that swap it with the Argentine cargo.
Right.
So that now found a home for a vessel that had no home, and took the vessel out where we had to find a home. And okay, we managed, literally scampered around the whole region and sold it to Philippines. So this is essentially how the whole industry was struggling at that point. Subsequently, okay, a month later or so, the blacklist was lifted. And so the trade started flowing again. But by then people piled up heaps of losses. So most of the competition, everybody was losing money really at that time. And there was not much you could do about it because physically the ships are stuck. So
Right.
quite some time, maybe about 3-4 months before all this got gradually sorted out. And then the calculations went on and on anyway after that.
Mm.
Got into a lot of arbitrations, cases, and all those sort of things. So this is when we had one last ship coming from Brazil that, again, the buyer did not open LC. Now, the ship arrived and we said, instead of going anywhere, just hang around Hong Kong. And so it went up to Hong Kong and waited. And we were trying to run through this whole gamut of options as to what do we do with the ship. Remember, by then, it's about 3 months into the crisis. There was no home for any cargoes anywhere in the world. Now
Right.
you have Brazil if at all. And then I don't even know what the re-import procedures in a country are, FITO and other things. And Rotterdam, Europe, everything was full. Asia was, I mean, everybody got battered by buyers elsewhere in China, in Asia got battered by the suppliers because everybody was knocking on everybody's door saying, someone even said, I'll rent a warehouse for you. You just import, keep it there, use it next year. You know, all that kind of arguments
Right.
were also. So we said, what do we do now? Now, it's very clear that this model of supplying just beans to third parties in China is not going to work. There has to be a better way of doing this business since we are in this business and we want to grow this business in a way.
Thank you for joining us in yet another episode of Move Conversations. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the Move Conversations YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get notifications of new episodes. Thank you very much. Till I see you in the next episode. Thank you very much. Have a great day.